Thank you for listening to this podcast from TRE, Talk Radio Europe, your voice in Spain and around the world. For more information, please visit tre.radio.
And Mark Hanbidge. Mark, good morning to you, my friends.
I'm doing good. You're not too far off. It's raining fairly heavily here.
Yeah, indeed. It's one of the people always say to me, "What? Oh, I love going to Ireland. I love going to the island because it's so green." And it's like when people say I love going to Scotland, it's like, let me explain why Ireland and Scotland are so green, because it rains most of the time, especially this time of year.
The summer's over. The summer's over.
Right then. So I was sitting there. I'll picture the scene, right? It's the rugby, it's the Lions. I thought, I'm going to watch this match. It's going to be a belter because Australia are going to come out. I went to the Hogan stand, well-known Irish pub in San Pedro. I got my seat there and I arrived a little bit late. And as soon as I sat down, there was an injury, and then there was a bad weather break. So that was me rugby done.
Yeah, no, it wasn't the greatest third test in the world, but I think everyone knew that the Wallabies were going to come out, and they had sort of like a grudge to almost clear out after that second test. Yeah. So it was almost inevitable that, something was going to crack in them, and well, definitely did, 22-12. Yeah. It definitely did.
You'd have to say it wasn't exactly. I mean, for old school rugby players like myself, this is how I remember playing the game. And B, there was a lot of emotion. Should we say there was a lot of emotion left on the pitch? And rugby isn't always sort of basketball rugby, is it?
No, not at all. Listen, it honestly, I think the conditions would have suggested that it was probably more suited to Australia, and then the Lions also, Toje, Freeman, Ryan, they all sort of went off injured. So the Lions weren't playing their strongest team, but also it was two other very tough matches, so they would have been tired. But at the end of the day, you can't make too many excuses because Australia came out. They had a grudge from that last match. It was, I can't remember the last time in vivid memory that there was so much conversation around like officials and safety in rugby and player safety. So there's a lot of media attention around that second test. And what that's going to do to the dressing room is it's going to rally players. It gives them something to sort of, be almost frustrated and angry about. But I think at the end of the day, they went into that second test in the second half leading 23-5. That's an 18-point lead. Not many teams come back from that. So that's also in their ears, sort of thinking like, well, the Lions didn't win that game. We lost that game. Yeah. So going into the third test, I think, that is in the back of their mind. They've been like, listen, we know we can beat these guys. And they did. They came out and they played very well.
Indeed. I mean, what do you think? I mean, as I said before, last time we spoke, that people were saying, when the game went professional, the Lions were going to be finished. I mean, there is talk of Farrell being the captain for, being the manager for the Lions in New Zealand. That is an entirely different prospect, isn't it? Of course, taking the Lions down to New Zealand.
It is, and it's not what I'm entirely opposed to. I think if you look at his history, he's built a culture of winning and resilience. Once again, I'm gonna keep coming back to that second test. You have to have that resilience to build back from that 18-point lead. We've seen it 1,000 times with Ireland, how many times teams have relentlessly just attacked, and Ireland have always weathered that through brilliant defence, which was where Andy Farrell came from as a defence coach. So when you look at the candidates to lead the New Zealand tour, I can't think of too many better than Farrell. It is going to be that there is a little bit of a what was left in the table situation with Australia. I don't think a lot of people felt that it was the Lions, strongest ever tour. A lot of that is overshadowed by the fact of that sort of conversation over player safety. But I think when you look at the candidates for coaches and leading that Lions team, there isn't really many that can come up to par with Farrell's accomplishments.
But when you said the conversation about player safety, because there are always going to be those people who drag there and go, oh, you see, it's rugby, everything's gone woke, and and player safety, it's a game for men, etc., etc. And you only have to look at the documentary that came over about the England rugby team, the 2003 World Cup winning squad, and you look at the players, look at Phil Vickery, and you look at some of the damage that's been done, the long-term damage. Steve Thompson is heartbreaking when you see what's happened to him, and that the long-term effects. Is that what you think about player safety in terms of concussions and tackles and sort of binding on when it's a tackle, a shoulder charge, etc.?
Yeah, I think the first thing you have to look at is who the conversation came from, which was Dan Sheehan's high, quote unquote, high clear out, and we have to look at Sheehan as a player and his history, and he's not malicious at all. He's a professional. He's shown that on multiple occasions. He's represented his country, and so I don't think there's any malicious intent from him. So then going over the conversation about player safety it always is one, even at the youth level. I mean, I went through some fairly bad injuries, and it's always a conversation from 12 and up. How can we make the game safer? How can we make the game better and more entertaining? But the fact is, when you've got massive 6'3", 6'4" guys running into each other, there's only such a limit to the safety you can have on that before it impedes on the actual first of all the culture of the game, but then secondly the entertainment of the game, because if you're going to start wrapping them in bubble wrap, it's not going to be as good. I think the main point of sort of all the media attention was the TMO, and it was sort of, it didn't intervene. And you see it in every game. You saw it in Formula One over the weekend. You see it in football constantly. We're seeing it in the NFL. They're bringing more technology at the start of this year into the rules. Is that if you have all this technology, why isn't it being used, more often and in the right places? Yeah.
The thing,
and that's the main conversation.
The thing is, Mark, though, I can argue. Okay, so we'll come to Formula One in a minute. Okay, so exceeding track limits, that's fine. But with and to football to a certain extent, although it has obviously the VAR is now decried. But with rugby, with the TMO and rugby, if you slow a rugby, and you and I have both played, at very low levels. But due to the nature of rugby, it is a contact sport, and also rugby players are fitter than they ever were, especially when I played. Yeah, so if you look at the game then. But if you slow down a rugby tackle, it just looks like total violence at the best of times, and so you will be infringing, because half the time, we always used to call it the dark arts, but half the time the referee doesn't, nobody knows what's sort of going on. Haskell's got a great sort of sketch about that, where everybody doesn't know what's going on, then the referee just blow and go advantage to the Blues. And that is kind of, but if you have a TMO who's looking at stuff, 2 minutes later on a slow mo, it's going to look like, I don't know, it's going to look like the melee at the Battle of Agincourt rather than a fair rugby match, mate.
That is the point of rugby. Is it's one of those sports, almost like the NFL, where there is no nice way of looking at it. Like, it is an inherently tough and violent sport.
Yeah.
Not in the malicious violence, but just in generally how players have to be sort of going into the pitch and that mindset. But I think just the best thing to do is look at it as best you can from like an objective look at the rule book and have people in those positions who are knowledgeable and preferably have actually played the game as well. We see that in F1 all the time. It always helps when the people who are stewards, who are race directors, are former drivers or involved in some capacity themselves.
Exactly, as and we used to have on our school shirts back in the 80s. Rugby cultured violence. Right then, move swiftly on. F1, let's go do it in reverse, because it was a fascinating Hungarian Grand Prix, and Ferrari looked like they managed to once again snatch defeat from the jaws of victory.
Yeah, listen, thankfully we're on a radio station in Spain and not Italy, because I don't think I'd be forgiven for saying this, but Ferrari once again have messed up, and I feel really bad for Leclerc, because they stunned, like I was even stunned watching it, that they managed to get pole by so little, but it was definitely thanks to the changing conditions in Q3. And what was weird about it is that McLaren had dominated, up until that point. I think Norris was the first 2 practices and Piastri took FP3. But Leclerc was showing that in the right conditions, the Ferrari upgrades they brought last week definitely could work. But on the other spectrum, that you had Hamilton, who was 12th, and he gave what I can only describe as a really painful interview to just watch, where he called himself useless, and he said that Ferrari probably needs to look into a new driver. And I've been watching F1 since 2016. So when that title fight between him and Verstappen came about in 21, I was like, I want a new champion. I'm rooting for Verstappen. But one thing I'll always say is I never want to see someone who is the GOAT. It's not deniable. 7 championships and 2 different teams. You never want to see someone go through that, because it's just, you're seeing the life nearly sucked out of them, the love sucked out of them, and it was a really tough weekend for him. He doubled down on it in the interview after the race, and it's not enjoyable to watch him go through that at all, whether you like Hamilton or not.
Yeah, I first saw Hamilton in F2 a very long time ago when famously went past an F2 race down the inside of a certain Nelson Piquet Jr., who was so surprised that he went off the circuit in shock. The boy has always been good, has Lewis, but Ferrari is a graveyard of champions. Alonso went down there trying to get wins for them, trying to championship for them, couldn't get it. Vettel went there for them, couldn't get it either. Ferrari is if you're like a Real Madrid, it will eat you if you can't get it correctly. And away from, Hamilton might just be down on himself at the moment, but he did have an amazing drive in the last Grand Prix where he came back, storming up the field, so he still got it. But what was more worrying was the sheer pace of the Ferrari at the beginning of the Grand Prix, and then it just dropped off a cliff, and you just went, hang on a second, how does Leclerc? Because you could hear the desperation in his voice as well, because he was just like, he was streaks ahead of McLaren, which was really gave a shock to the guys in Papaya, and then it just all fell away from them.
Yeah, so George Russell actually commented on this himself, is that Ferrari have faced issues with keeping in the regulations all season. That started in China with a disqualification. Both drivers got disqualified. And the same thing that happened in China basically happened this weekend as well. Ferrari's plank, basically the on the bottom car, was wearing too quickly. So they had to raise the tire pressures to raise the car up during the hard tire sprint, and that increased the car's ride height. And it was the same issue post-China, is the car is designed to go lower, but when it goes lower, the plank wears. You face disqualifications that they raise it up, which basically sucked any kind of pace out of it that was in it. That is Russell's conclusion. Ferrari haven't commented on it, but we've seen it in China. It's more than likely the same issue here. And what it comes down to is a fundamental flaw in the development of the car. So it's nothing to do with the drivers. You hate to see, obviously there's stuff going on in the background with Hamilton that we don't know about, but you hate to see it because it's not the driver's fault at all, especially on this weekend. And
also Verstappen, just fell off a cliff this weekend. Tsunoda was absolutely nowhere again. Excuse me. But there's going to be a serious rethink as now, sort of what Red Bull's going to do post Christian Horner.
I think in the Red Bull camp, the full focus, obviously Verstappen's still there. He's third place, I think 187 points in the championship. But right now, the only question in the championship, is it going to be Norris or is it going to be Piastri? There's 9 point spot between them. So for Red Bull, I think if they're thinking straight, they're thinking the 2026, trying to make sure that the Ford engines are going to be up to par. Ford have a history in F1. It's not particularly a glamorous one. So I know there's probably some doubts there of some of the older veterans. So I think Red Bull, like Williams, like Aston Martin, have to be looking forward to the next regulation changes, because not that this season is over, but if you invest too much in this season, you're going to be off-putting yourself for 3 or 4 years minimum.
Let's move away because some big news in football was, a Spurs icon. He's leaving from he's leaving the London club and going to play in the States, I believe.
Yeah, Son. He's left after 10 years. It's unbelievable. I almost still remember him coming to the club. I was a massive Premier League fan, and I researched the price. It was 22 million from Bayer Leverkusen, which, funnily enough, they're actually getting most of. I think they've got most of that back through the years. 173 goals, 101 assists in 454 games, and I mean, Harry Kane 2 years ago, Son now. It really is the end of an era for that Spurs team. But I think a lot of people would have said that, Son's lost, that he's not who he was. But his stats actually indicate that he was still doing fairly well even up until last year. Of course, he failed to reach a double in league goals, but he still had a lot of assists. He still had a lot of chances when he was playing, and Spurs only won 7% of the games that he wasn't involved in. So they really did rely on him quite a lot compared to the 42% they did win when he was involved in the squad. So he was obviously still a big part of that, and I'm sure Thomas Frank isn't exactly excited at the prospect of losing a team leader. But hopefully that frees up a little wage space into bringing in more players, and they have brought in more players. Carlos Polina has come in from Bayern Munich for a loan with what is reported to be a 30 million option to buy. And this is actually a pretty smart move. There's not much space in Bayern right now for people, and he has a strong track record in the Premier League. He was at Fulham just 2 years ago. So I think this is a solid move for them. I'm not too sure about the 30 million, but as far as the loan goes, I think it's a solid move for Spurs.
And what else has been piquing your interest in the transfer market? Isak will he go? Will he stay? Will he even be welcome anywhere?
Yeah, I mean, this is I think first off, that the British media has really misrepresented this transfer to an extent. Of course, Liverpool want another striker, with Al Hilal pursuing Darwin Núñez for a rumored £61 million, which I would take if I was them. But especially if you've Isak coming in the door and you've possibly 130 million going out. But a lot of people have been on this sort of train of, Isak's over in Real Sociedad, he's training with that team. But what the British media failed to really include in those headlines is that Real Sociedad are on tour. They're not at their training facilities. But alongside that, there's been a history over the last 2-3 years. He came from Real Sociedad for 60 million. He has a team of doctors over there that he routinely goes to when he's injured. So this isn't, him training at a different facility. That actually is a regular occurrence for him when he's injured. So to see all these news reports and saying, all this, I think a lot of it has been stirring up drama. It's not ideal for Newcastle either, because they're on preseason tour in Asia. So there's not much that, like, Eddie Howe can do. He's been asked all these questions in press conferences. There's really not much he can say. So it is tough, but he's returned to Newcastle. He's looking to rejoin with the first team. So it's also a difficult position Isak's in, because he's in his prime right now, and he can go to a Liverpool side that won the Premier League. And you sort of want to be starting to make those moves to win trophies now in your career instead of in 5 years. And the trouble is, Newcastle have all the potential to become a big team and to compete for those trophies. But the question that I'm sure he's asking, his camp's asking, is that going to be this year, or is that going to be in 5 years? So is he going to waste his prime years, trying to get a team to the top, or go to a team that's already at the top? And as a person who's not a Newcastle fan, I can say it's a fairly fair question for a player to ask. Yeah. Do I want to, go win the big trophies, get that glory? It's obviously not nice for a Newcastle fan, but if you look in the transfer market, they don't have the same pull as those other teams, and that's a worry for them. But I think Newcastle, they still have a lot of financial backing. The fact that they are on pre-season tour in Asia means that they're taking steps to becoming a bigger club, to getting more revenue streams across the world.
Yeah.
And when you have those revenue streams open, you can attract bigger and bigger players. But even if Isaac's leaving or not leaving, they're still pursuing another deal for a striker, Benjamin Sesko. I believe they met an offer for 70 million plus a few million add-ons. It was rejected by Leipzig as Sesko was, quote unquote, secretly quoted as saying he prefers Man United as an option.
Interesting. The words you don't want to hear is, or we always hear is, oh, well, we may have got knocked out in the fourth round, but we're building for the future.
Yes, yeah. Sesko would be a great pickup. It's generally believed that he has a very high ceiling. He's 6'4", which, is just, it's fairly tall. You don't get many strikers like that, at least competing at that level. But what's special about him is he has the height, but he also has the pace. And he's a very, very fast, very, very tall striker. Generally, a good combination to work well in the Premier League. The only question is if, apparently there's a gentleman's agreement. There's no official release clause, but there's a gentleman's agreement that if a bid between 70 to 80 million comes in, that it can be done. And Man United are, optimistic, but, to make that move, they would have to sell, I would imagine, one or two players. The money's there, but they also have to look at, they can't make too much of a loss during this window because it will put them into red of the financial regulations. So the only way I could see a deal possibly being done there is if they can structure it to where they pay a lot of the money over different periods.
And finally, NFL, because I know it's one of the big things that you are into. So what's been happening with the over in the States?
Well, there's a general excitement in the NFL right now because it's coming to Spain in Madrid and Bernabeu this year. So the season's starting in September. It's just around the corner. And the training camps are starting. And the Commanders and the Dolphins are going to be the teams coming over to Spain. And both of their training camps are going. And I think the mood's relatively high for both. The only thing bringing down the Commanders camp at the moment is Scary Terry. Terry McLaurin is holding out. He wants a new contract, and if he doesn't get it, there's a trade on the lines. But in general, I think they're a fairly optimistic camp. They're coming off a playoff run which no one saw, and besides that, I think everyone's in fairly high moods. The Seahawks and the Falcons, the camps are going fairly strong there. There was a surprise stand net in Seattle where Kenny McTokish is out season long, unfortunately. He was a rookie. You never like to see that for someone so early in their career, especially because it can have massive ramifications. Usually rookies are on 1-2 year contracts, and these 2 years are, so important for developing their career after the rookie contract. So you never like to see him out. And the Falcons, apparently there's actually more trouble there than we thought. And trouble in the good way, as in there's a lot of competition for places. So we're going to see that. But the big news is can the Eagles go back to the Super Bowl? And they've been in the Super Bowl a good few times in the last 10 years. But Nick Sirianni is sort of looking at a back-to-back Super Bowl, which we've only seen from in my time watching NFL, the Chiefs and the Patriots come to mind. So it's a huge job. It's going to take a lot from Jalen Hurts. A lot of people think that he mightn't have the talent to do that. And Nick Sirianni is saying that he's definitely progressed a lot during the summer, and he's looking forward to people seeing him. So it's going to be very interesting in the NFL. I can't wait. Of course, there's games coming to Ireland, and it's South America, Spain, it's Germany. There's games all over, so it's becoming much more international this year.
Excellent stuff, Mark. Listen, I'm going to run out of time. I'm going to crash this if I'm not careful. If people want to find you online, where's the best place to track you down and say the nice things to you?
Talk Radio Europe. You can find Daybreak Sport. I'm right there. You can listen back if you miss Jaws and I speaking. If you miss the voices, you can hear us back.
Dave will be back next week. Thank you so much for your time. It's been brilliant to speak to you, Mark. Have a great rest of your week and stay dry.
Yeah, I'll try.
Thanks, mate.
You've been listening to a TRE production. If you've enjoyed this program, there'll be another episode waiting for you next week, right here on this platform, where you can also access our extensive back catalogue of shows and interviews. For more information on our live programming, social media channels and apps, and how to contact Talk Radio Europe, please visit tre.radio.